there was something I fell asleep kind of thinking about. I read a little bit. I I saw a comment from a guy, and he was criticizing writing, and he, in a one-liner, said, well, "Why is it that every writer feels the need to teach?" And it's not true. It's hyperbole. And this guy's I don't think the entire YouTube channel, or in this case, the entire blog with the videos on the YouTube channel, is all about giving sarcastic writing advice. But that's at least where that comment was posted. And I have in a playlist writing advice, and I'm also giving it. And I do know about that compulsion. I think I've also talked on it before, where a person will, in a sense, have gone through some sort of crucible themselves and want to express things. And it's not like curating and sending stuff out as entertainment. It's some sort of need to reduce the hardships that others would face when those others are also interested in the same topic being taught. And it's not necessarily even teaching or education or anything like that. It's not necessarily opinions. It's not you should do things a certain way, not necessarily. But there is a kind of conveyance that happens. In my particular case, I'm not really waiting on. I'm not waiting to be expert in any sense, even to be self-declared as an expert, let alone recognized or awarded or something like that. There's a problem in the hacker community, for lack of a way of putting it, where there are people. Well, first off, you may not actually know what the term or the concept hacker means, but it's just a person who's really good at putting together model railroads. But in computing, it has to do with a certain level of skill that is um, also seen in a kind of a playfulness that's there. But it is seen in the extremes of actual competency. It's not necessarily the dark side of things that the media likes to portray, because the media has trouble actually adding value to anything, so they want to grab attention, so they just talk about all the evils in the world, when in some cases when none exists for a particular thing that they're talking about. And in the problem of that, the domain of hackers is who gets to call themselves a hacker. How is it possible to objectively label somebody? Because it's not self-identification for something like that. You don't get to call yourself that. And in some sort of similar vein, I wonder if a person can really call themselves. I mean, writer is thus just the generic term, but hacker is a kind of a generic term, but it's also a kind of title that acknowledges a kind of ascendant skill of some sort. Well, who gets to call themselves that? And there was this idea floating around where only a hacker can anoint the title to a person to make them a hacker. And it's pretty acknowledged who the actual original, the parents, the progenitors of the title, who actually can be universally in that space recognized as having that title, and of anybody would have the right to knight someone with that title. That exists out there. It's a discussion. It's one of these irrelevant discussions, honestly. It doesn't mean anything. But it's one of these kind of thought experiment questions that those kinds of minds go after. And that I lost my train of thought, of course, but somewhere in that is the same argument, wondering if a writer can convey something to another person, to help educate them, to help something. I really had an interesting train of thought there. Well, maybe that was just an interesting side story. So I'll just kind of start from scratch again, because what else can I do? Authenticity in presenting this, I suppose. So for my concern was, I couldn't sleep. I just got up and I at least shaved my face, at least. And I couldn't sleep because I had the idea planted in my head, thinking about the compulsion to teach. And the trap is that maybe it's arrogant of a person to think that they could do that. But I think it's just natural human desire. When you love something, you want to share it, something like that. And maybe this is something that can't be fully appreciated by somebody until they get to a certain comfort. And maybe that comes with age, maybe that comes with experience, maybe that comes with actual topical expertise. But I've seen this trend all over the place. I've paid attention to it because often it's done wrong, because a person will lay down a path for other people where they make the assumption that their way of pursuing their path to get to where they are, when other people say they want to get to the same place, an educator, loosely speaking, thinks that describing the path they went on without any of the mistakes will be correct for somebody else. And that's almost never the case. That's a trap that everybody seems to have. And we don't really have a way of admitting to ourselves that, well, how do you teach somebody to make mistakes? How do you teach somebody to follow your regrets? It's not, even if you can do the mental gymnastics to make it an ethical thing to do in the first place, and you'd have to be like sociopathic in determination to actually fool somebody into doing that. And you'd have to shape it in such a way that a person would follow through to actually make the same mistakes, and have them not realize that you've played with them, to have them do things that way, the hard way. I mean, there's stuff in really complicated semi-religious philosophies, like something like Zen, where they'll have to trick you into coming to some version of enlightenment. And this is also the case in a lot of martial arts, where there's an expression, chop wood, carry water. And you might be able to see it in one of these old, like 1980s, like chop socky kung fu, out of China, awfully lip synced kind of movies, where at so many levels it's just disrespectful of the art of filmmaking, or storytelling or anything like that, but I always think of those. And for some reason, there's one scene in one movie that I forgot, and it has to do with there's a lot of people in China, like a lot, and there's because of that there is a lot of interest in something like martial arts in basically everything. Um, and there is a significant history, and due to the number of people and the focus, culturally, well, culturally speaking, even though it's kind of regional, we vaguely say a Chinese master, which not that's not exactly the right approach for labeling a person or anything like that. So you can imagine how there would be many people qualified, and of that because there are many people qualified, you can imagine a master's master, the wizened old man who is really good because of a large sample of masters. If you pull the best out of that, because of the volume you have, that best will be absolutely crazy incredible. And some movie where there's this guy, and it's because there's one guy, and because there are a lot of capable and qualified interested students, there's a huge amount of people that this guy's managing. So it's not like a small class mentoring one person. You've got this situation where you've got one like, let's say that it's an objectively incredible person who also has a whole bunch of competent students, really dedicated students. There's not just hobbyists. And again, we're talking about a 1980s movie that's presenting this stuff. So the rest of the movie is terrible, but there's this interesting thing to learn where in the background, there are all of these students, and they're all doing dumb things. And they're not like we imagine training martial arts as being a whole bunch of people all in rows and columns, all practicing the same kind of shadow boxing kata, all kind of miming in the same pace and the same strength, trying to all be the same. But this scene in this movie has like an outdoor gym, a jungle gym kind of thing. And it's really simple, and it's really kind of the obstacle course that we think of for like old school American military movies, something where you've got structures and logs, and you can see just chains of people all barefoot running up logs, and they're carrying buckets, and they're all running around. They're doing this, and it's useless crap when an outside observer sees that versus the rows of people practicing something that would be considered fighting. And very much like how that wizened old man having to deal with a volume of people, you can maybe make some excuses there, and maybe you can make some excuses where there's calisthenics involved in having people run around. They're getting endurance and strength and all this kind of stuff. Wonderful. But that's the actual trick in the martial art, in learning the martial art. The actual trick is in what is going on with the people while they're doing all that stuff. Some of it is like if you've ever seen the movie Fight Club. Good movie, you should see it. There's a little bit when they're starting to do the actual club itself. So the actual kind of like underground terrorist training school kind of thing, where you have somebody parked outside and they have to demonstrate their dedication by staying out there and being told that they shouldn't be there, because really they shouldn't be there until they are adamant and kind of disrespectful of the authority of the person telling them to leave. That's by persisting is how they prove that they're actually worthy of being there in the first place. That's just a basic barrier, and because you got so many people to deal with, you put that barrier in place, and it's a pretty straightforward barrier. It's kind of like low effort in terms of the very limited time and patience of the, call it a grandmaster. And there's something similar in that, where you've got the grandmaster who's got so many people, you just have them stand in the rain for, and this is actually a story with that, and I can't even remember. It's like before that master would ever see a person, they'd have to stand in the rain for 3 days or whatever the heck. And it was an actual thing. Not, I know that there's have been stories about that, and I'm pretty sure one of them is a little bit more like this, actually a thing. But you can imagine a grandmaster doing that with, you've got the outdoor gymnasium of people running around doing all that pointless stuff, and the people who say, well, this is complete, I came here for learning martial arts. I've been chopping your wood for your fire, and I've been carrying your water for 3 years, and I haven't actually learned any martial arts, and they'll leave. And good, like they're not, you got too many people to work with anyway, so that person's not dedicated. But honestly, they have to go through that crucible, and then they're going to be people who realize, well, they think they realize it as being a test to prove how dedicated they are, and they miss the point as well. And if you've ever seen the movie Karate Kid, I mean, maybe in the context of its time, it's a good movie. I think it's still a good movie for the one lesson, which is the guy's doing some useless stuff. Wax on, wax off. Like, I've been waxing your car, and I don't think it's said in the movie, but even when it doesn't really need to be cleaned, for so long, you haven't taught me anything. He's like, no, I've been teaching plenty, or rather, you've been learning plenty without realizing it. And I'm wondering if there's a parallel to teaching somebody mistakes, tricking them into it, where you can imagine all those people running around carrying water, chopping wood. Well, they're doing this useless thing, but it's not useless, because you have to have, it's not just the strength that's being developed, it's the incredible amount of relaxation needed to carry water while not having any strength anymore, because it's something that's been done all day. And people who have been like through significant military training will have that, the experience where they're exhausted past the point of their body being present to actually help perform that work. Where it's, and in some martial arts, that's the direction that's the gauntlet that students have to push through before they get from the physicality of the martial art to the spirituality of it. Yeah, spoiler, if you ever want to learn martial arts, quite a lot of them are like that. And most students won't ever get there, partly because you got to work in the morning. So coming into work bruised and beaten and so tired that stairs are intimidating, it's not usually something anybody is ever pushed to by any school, let alone can push themselves to. So you've got a bunch of people chopping wood, carrying water, and only the ones that come to a tiny version of their own personal enlightenment will actually come to actually learn the martial art by doing that. And it's weird, because they haven't learned any moves. They haven't learned the names of all the different shadow boxing techniques. They haven't learned the patterns, but they've learned something really fundamental that goes past physicality into something almost spiritual, and their body is aligned with that. This is something I could talk about, but honestly, it's not what this channel is about, so I'm glad I snuck it in here. Everything is related to everything, which is also related to a thing that I've read. Again, it's related to reading, but I'm not going to talk about that right now, maybe one day. So it's like a trap that writers have to convey stuff, and I wonder if there's a way of conveying stuff such that, like chopping wood, carrying water, they can talk about certain practices that may or may not make any sense whatsoever, but like teaching Zen will have a student pursue those things and get more than the face value of those things. So, for example, and this is kind of a bad example. So, I've got a list from Ray Bradbury doing an interview, and it's an interview or a monologue. Anyhow, he was prompted to talk about what he recommends in terms of regular practices for people. And again, with, I mean, I guess you can get away with saying that he's an objectively excellent writer. A lot of people will agree with you. Maybe that's all it takes. You know, less dissent when you're making a statement makes it more truthy. And he was talking, he was saying, well, every day, well, you need to read more than you write. And there's an expression, I'm going to link it to a Christian saying it from a Christian perspective, which is, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen more than you speak. And that there's a parallel there with writing, which is read more than you write. It's something I don't actually do because I don't write in written English. Now, I'll talk about that one other day. And so this great author is talking about reading every day. Well, what do you read? Well, what do you recommend? He's saying, well, you got to read a single short story every single day. You got to read a poem every day. That made me cringe. I hate poetry. You got to read a short story every week. So you got to read a good chunk of one every day. You got, and he's talking about these things, and then he's name dropping all these authors. And I don't know the names, and some of it is a problem of I have trouble hearing. I have trouble understanding. Like I can't understand a lot of accents. It's really hard. And so in video form, I can just go back again and again and again until I kind of figure things out. And then I do a whole bunch of Googling because, you know, I'm an archivist and I can find stuff. I can just find it. And so if somebody mumbles something half incoherently, which I was confused a couple of times. And so I went and I actually built the list of everything he was talking about, of all these people that a lot of whom I had not heard of. So I went and made sure there was a Wikipedia article or something. I got the right name for everything. This is the person who you should go and you should read their collected works. And this is the person whose poetry is hailed as the best ever, and etc. And so that's a, air quotes, objectively good writer giving advice that really doesn't have anything to do with writing as such. It's go chop wood, carry water, go read this stuff with no explanations as to how that's even useful at all. Like, why would I care to read 1800s poetry? That's dumb. Like, why? There's no explanation attached. Just, I'm told to just go do it. Go do it. Oh, this great man tells me to go do something. What does he know? And maybe there's something that happened when he did it for himself. Maybe he never actually did it himself. Maybe he's just saying, you know, I wish somebody told me to do this because it would have made such a difference. And he just turns around and says, well, you should go. You're my grand experiment. You, my young interested writers, just you go do this. And I don't actually know if it's Ray Bradbury or not. I could go find the reference, but I'm not gonna do it right now. If I was live streaming, I would know how I would do it. I would probably have it in my archives because it's on a random comment on a random video on YouTube. And I have a Google Takeout because I have a hard time using any service online unless I have the ability to rescue my data. especially because, and I've read live the YouTube terms of service and I've gone through, they have the ability to just nuke you, everything you've ever done for no reason whatsoever. They can just, they can just make something up. There are words in the user agreement. Those words don't, they're a collection of letters. It doesn't mean anything at all. It's just somebody somewhere in a back room can just flip a coin for all that matters. They don't care. And they don't care, and they don't have to care because there's lots and lots of users, and they've nuked people you've never heard of. They've just nuked them, and you hear, I get little ripples, kind of like layers of different kinds of rock and fossil in archaeology. I get little snippets of people kind of talking about bits and pieces of these people that I can't find references to anymore, and you get re-uploads of videos, and you get like little murmurs of dissent of just people whose voices are too small to ever reach anywhere. So I pay attention to that kind of stuff. I pay attention to people talking about things that aren't there anymore, because it really bothers me. Well, it bothers me that people will talk about things and not give actual proper references to them, and also that they're so unclear when they're talking about it that I can't even properly go and look stuff up. It's such a shame when I'm interested in one thing and they talk about it and I can't go find more, because they talked about it like it was a live thing, like it was a big thing, it was a big deal for them. But it's just gone, and even the original author of that video is gone. Maybe their channel is inactive. Maybe this is just a re-upload that somebody else thought was of really good, and maybe that person is inactive. So YouTube doesn't even have the ability to contact an author anymore. I can't make response videos like I used to. Not all videos have comments open. Not all and there's no message feature for me to message a channel owner anymore. Maybe they don't fill out their contact email. Maybe it's not public. Maybe they don't list a Twitter or whatever other kind of social media link to a website. Maybe I can't, it's a scrambled name. I can't find that username used somewhere else on the internet. I can't hunt a person down, which I've done to learn more about that one video that they uploaded from that one thing from 8 years ago, and maybe they'll respond, maybe they'll remember, maybe I can't. It's just such a loss when that kind of thing happens. Tangent, the interesting tangents if you actually slog through these videos. So how could somebody be compelled to want to teach when that's not, you can't actually properly lay down your own, even if you know your own path, you can't properly lay it down well enough, and it's never going to be suitable for somebody else to come down to kind of travel that same path. And you're going to be curating your mistakes out, which is probably not a good thing. And you'll be throwing in other things with the assumption that this would have been a better thing for me to do, so I'll convey that instead of the nightmarish mess that I did. And you end up with an interested person who, even if they were to follow everything that they're advised to follow exactly, like I want to learn to draw, so I was really paying attention to this artist, not necessarily because I want to be a clone or quote unquote as good as her, but I don't know any better, so I'll do what I'm told. Like, if I don't know how to use a device, I will read the documentation and then I'll do what it says. I'm not going to make any assumptions. I'm just that type. And I don't have to, because I'm a bright guy and I can figure stuff out, and it's got to be really easy to do this. It's a bike shedding problem where people make the assumption that they understand something. I don't bother anymore. I don't need to be smart. I don't need to be smart in the dark with a new toy. I don't have to humiliate myself. It's not a humbling experience. The documentation's there. I like documentation. That's the thing I would read every day. Wow, I would not convey to somebody else, go read the manual for your monitor, go read the manual for your keyboard, go 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 and learn how to do these things. You should read the manual for some device you own. You should read a little bit every day. That would be really weird, really awful advice. That would be one of the things that I would omit, because I would think that it's stupid, even though it's a thing that I've done. And maybe that means that I couldn't properly convey the path that I followed, and I would be conveying a different path that would not lead to where I currently am. Not that you can actually reproduce yourself. I mean, every parent knows that your kid is going to go astray. And that's the best case, where you're spending the most time, the most loving care raising a child, and you're just not going to get that right. So what makes you think being an educator is going to let you get that right at all? Even when you really, really care, you're passionate about the topic, and you're passionate and you're caring about the person, which you should be. You should care. Every single opportunity, you should care if you want your. It's not even a message. It's when you love a thing and you want to send it off into the world, then you spend a little bit more time doing it, getting it right, and give a little bit of that joy out. And I lost my train of thought again. That was a good loss of a train of thought. I should wrap this up, since it's been over a half an hour. I hear that long form is really popular. I personally really like it because it allows these dumb tangents. And I personally like kind of unscripted things. And maybe this means that I would be so suited to a podcast, but I have no idea why that's interesting. Maybe I should, because I'm channeling a podcaster of some sort in me right now, doing this with this style. So yeah, writing and teaching it, conveying it is hard. It's incomplete. I think people, when they love something, they're kind of compelled to do it. And even though it's going to be done wrong, it's still kind of valuable. And a learner is going to curate through multiple people that are all doing that, and they're all going to kind of interpret with their own lens. They're all going to do it wrong because because they are students. They don't understand, but they do understand themselves better, so that's good. And so they pick and choose, and it's not going to be the correct thing to do, but they're going to try. I think everybody's kind of muddling through. And I think maybe it's different with me, where I want to do that, but I want to do that while not actually really knowing what I'm doing at all. So I'm kind of conveying all the mistakes as I'm doing them as well. Like the statement that I hate poetry and I don't want to be subject to reading that crap every day. Well, if I don't want to eat my vegetables. Okay, I'm gonna stop this now on that little whiny note.